Hey everybody, so you're kind of listening to a pretty impromptu episode. It's just me here, Casey here, and anyway, I've got a new buddy here. It's he's a percussionist, composer, and a storyteller. He's an active performer who's individually commissioned and premiered over 100 new works for percussion. So yeah, holy cow, I want to hear a little about that if we get to it. He's a recording artist in Los Angeles. He's the creator of what's called percussive storytelling, and he's a member of the Grammy-nominated Los Angeles Percussion Quartet, who we've had a few members of on the show already. So, y'all, I'm talking to Cory Hills. How's it going, Cory?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, just fine. Thanks. How's your quarantine? You look safe and sound.
Yeah, the children are in the rest of the house where they are not bothering me at this precise moment.
I
Whew,
saw
it's been
I
tough to
saw
say the
I
least.
saw a Facebook post that said if doctors don't find a vaccination soon, parents will because you guys are all just like stuck together.
Exactly. This new just all of a sudden homeschooling and the districts are great. It just takes a really long time for them to play catch up and to prepare for something that they obviously had no clue how to anticipate. So there are all these weird Zoom lessons and
Yep.
all kinds of new online learning things for elementary school, which of course, half the kids don't even know how to do anyway.
Yep, of course.
But
That's one of the things
it's
that's
it's something.
wearing. That's one of the things wearing me out a little bit. It's like anytime there's any obstacle to tackle, everyone's got eight different technology solutions. And Zoom, is it Zoom or is it GoToMeeting or is it Google Hangouts or is it Skype? And you're just like, oh man,
Yep.
no, let's just do Skype. Everyone has Skype. Come on, let's do Skype.
The original, right?
The original. Yeah. Well, we were gonna talk today just so pretty off the cuff because there was this cool Facebook chat going on and it was about just like the state of the repertoire. And I've heard you talk about this a little bit and you said, "Hey, we should totally talk about this." And I have a real opinionated voice on this, which I think is excuse me, which I think is awesome. So I don't know, man. Like, where do you want to start with this? Where do you think is a good place to,
Um,
why do you feel strongly about this? I'm not really sure where to drop the needle on it.
let's see here. Well, what one thing to just lay out first is that it's not it's it's not a us versus them or a this stinks, this doesn't stink kind of thing. It's not that.
Sure.
So for people who are like, oh man, this guy hates this or this guy loves this, it's not exactly that. It's more, I think, of a different approach to developing percussion as we push into the 21st century, and there's simply different trains of thought as far as uh, ways to approach that. And marimba has become this thing, and I say that, but there's one right over there
I
too.
see one. I can see
Um,
one. For those of you
yeah,
just listening, I see one.
it is there. It has not been used for firewood yet. But during a zombie apocalypse, I think like a sea, you could shape it down really well
Yeah.
and use it for something. Um, so it's part of my thing with the marimba is I think there's so many things, but that I personally have against it, even though I play it an awful lot for something that I have something against. I think it's more of its like place upon the mantle as the thing, right? And for better or for worse, we've definitely um, put it up there over the last 30 to 40 years. It's definitely grown in its stature and popularity, which is great. That's all good. But also that comes with it, in my opinion, some caveats.
Yeah, sure. And just to catch our listeners up a little bit, the topic of, we're all in this coronavirus quarantine right now. And by the way, I should say we're recording on March 24th, so I'm not quite sure when this will be released. And it seems like the coronavirus situation changes every day, so it might be very different by the time that I put this out. But So someone was saying, on Facebook that with this quarantine, it really puts some questions of perspective on marimba usage and how many students are like, well, if I don't have access to marimba, I don't know what to practice. So
Right.
Cory, I think, very eloquently put like, well, and a lot of people said too. I mean, it was a very healthy discussion up there and a lot of really good points. Just saying, do we do marimba too much? And is now a good time to back off and do some other things? And that was the conversation. So, and will this be a chance for us to say like, yeah, are we a little out of balance or not? And so I might
Right.
just add to what you're saying. I've had several non-percussionist colleagues ask me over the years, say, why do you guys study so much marimba? It's not in jazz, it's hardly in band music, it's not in orchestra music. I mean, I know there's an
Right.
exception to all of this somewhere, but it's hardly like standard in any of the regular
Yeah.
ensembles. It's not in rock and roll except for Frank Zappa. It's like, why is there such a focus on marimba? And they were just talking about percussionists at large, like why do we teach it so much? And I never really have a good answer for them, and nor have I really been felt super compelled to answer. But I think, regarding it being placed up on a mantle, I don't know if that's like, I think some of our biggest icons, like Steve Schick, he's not a marimba guy. Evelyn Glennie
Right.
definitely does a lot of marimba, but she also does a ton of percussion concertos. She's got her Bartok sonata. She's got a good handful of things. There's of course Keiko Abe, and there's of course Nane Mamura, and there's Nancy Zeltzman and Koshka. There are certainly marimba soloists, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I almost just think it's kind of something that especially younger people they just think is so cool. They just look at those four mallets going everywhere and they're just like, whoa, 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 this is so amazing. It looks so complicated and intricate, and it makes me dizzy just watching. I find it so fascinating. I want to do that. And so to answer, I think these colleagues' questions, like, why do you guys teach marimba so much? Like, you should teach drum set. In fact, there's a conversation I really did have once, and it was, why do you percussion guys teach marimba so much? You should teach drum set. That's what your students will be doing. And I say, well, I'm not sure if that's what they'll be doing, because you look at potential jobs that they're after, which are, say band director jobs, high school teaching jobs, middle school teaching jobs. It's not like there's a room of 50 kids and they're all playing drum sets. If they're going to go
Right.
they're going to go out on the marching field, and they're from, say, Virginia, where there's a really big, healthy marching band culture. Yeah, there's a lot more mallet instruments on the field than drum sets. You'd be lucky if there's one drum set down there. So I don't know. Like, when they say like you shouldn't be teaching that, I don't know if they're right.
Yeah. I don't think it should be not taught or taught. I just think it's another instrument, and it's a great instrument in a lot of ways. And I have nothing against certain parts of it. From a sonic standpoint, I do. I find it incredibly one-dimensional, and not incredibly useful, um, because it pretty much is monotimbral, and that but that's a personal preference, right? That's me saying I don't particularly care for the repetitive sound of this instrument because it doesn't have a, an incredibly varied use yet. And so we'll come back to that point, because
Cool.
that's something I want to come back to. So remember I said yet. Um, so that's one thing with the marimba. What I will say is that it's an incredibly useful tool for building us up into artists. And I very rarely use the term percussionist unless I have to. I generally refer to all musicians as artists, and that's what we aspire to be. So, with that being said, I don't want to be a marimbist or a drum set player or a conga player or a timpanist. I want to be an artist who plays percussion. And marimba is incredibly valuable for us because of the melodic and harmonic components that we don't get in the non-pitched world, and a vibraphone as well. And I could make a case that we should be doing a heck more vibraphone, but
Sure.
let's just say mallet instruments in general. They they're very useful because we need to have that component, and especially as we aim to push the development of our instrument further and further, we're competing with hundreds and hundreds of years of repertoire and development of other instruments. And melody and harmony and form and some of these other parameters have an incredible history that we're definitely behind in as far as standard repertoire goes. And so with that being said, I think that the mallets are great. They're very useful, but they're a tool to get us to these other levels. And so I don't like to look at it as the answer, more of an option.
I've heard that discussion before, like now that we can play with four voices, we get to suddenly participate in a conversation that's been going on for hundreds of years that we've
Right.
kind of been excluded from. And that's why a lot of people are drawn to marimba, because suddenly the conversation becomes more rich and there's more rigor to the whole theory side of things. It's very hard,
Sure.
ask a theorist to analyze a Delacluse etude, and it's tough because of the limited timbre. It's like, and actually,
Yeah.
something you said about the just your preference for marimba has a real repetitive timbre, and there's not much variation in there. Something I love about a lot of instruments. I feel like every time there's lack in color, it gives opportunity for something else. Like some of the most abstract expression, sorry, not that's a little confusing. The most expressive performances I've ever seen on an abstract level have been snare drum solos. Yeah, and I mean, because the fact that the voice is so limited and it is so one-dimensional, it in fact like automatically puts you into a more abstract area. It's like it's the more indirect a performance gets, the more open it is to these other channels. It also means the more likely it is to fail. Less is handed to
Which
you.
is okay.
Well, if the performance is really, really good, I mean, you would really have to have a great plan to do an hour long snare drum performance. I mean, you'd really have to plan that thing out and be playing really, really, really well, I think. But those have been some of the most inspiring performances I've ever seen where, you kind of have that brain explosion moment, and all of a sudden I feel like, holy crap, I just discovered something about the universe that I can't put into words and has never been described in any way. And you get this like, oh, this big philosophical weighted moment hits me. And those are often with the most humble of the voices in music, like a snare
Right.
drum or a one-dimensional thing. So I totally hear you that, yeah, there's not a lot of timbral contrast in the instrument, but I think part of its charm and its character is also its humility. Like you need that humility to be real. Some instruments do.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
That's yeah, and marimba definitely has that. But going back to when I said yet, so
Yeah.
that's something that I think I am very curious on, and something that I am very passionate about, which is, and not afraid to jump into either, which is nice. That it's the current state of the repertoire as it stands, and then what's happening right now, and then the future. So you said before, you said like it invites people to come in and sort of create if you're given that monotimbral language, to create a more abstract approach. And some of the coolest and most innovative approaches to sound have come from that. I 100% agree. And I definitely agree that there are people who have come in and absolutely thrown things helter skelter. in beautiful ways. But what I want to bring up is this conversation I had with Bill Kraft. All right, so Bill Kraft, still alive, everybody, by the way, lives out
Yeah.
here in LA. He's the man. I don't know what to say except he's incredible. And the stories just get, every time you go visit him, the stories get just, it's incredible. There's
Cool.
great stories. But we had this conversation. So if people who don't, it may not be familiar, Bill Kraft is a incredible percussionist, member of the Los Angeles Philharmonic percussion section for years, and then kind of segued out of that into full-time composition,
Yeah.
ended up winning a Pulitzer, and has pretty much been a composer for like a whole second half of his life. And I think, geez, I don't remember if he's 96, 7, or 8, or he's somewhere in there. Sorry,
He's
Bill,
up
I
there.
should know. But we had a conversation when he was writing the quartet piece about sound. And he had a very interesting sort of take on this, in that he was saying that in the 40s, 50s, 60s time, and I'm bastardizing the decades a little bit, but the composers, so I mean, from a percussion knowledge standpoint, we all know that we're a fairly new instrument, new as in taught in the Western classical conservatory setting. So that's pretty new. And he was describing essentially how they would get these pieces and the percussionists, or they would just be tasked with figuring things out. They had no basis of technique, no basis of comparison, or even basis of the construction of the instruments, which is a really big issue. So no standardization of notation, I mean, anything. And they would just get these composers to come to them, Stravinsky, Shostakovich, and they just hand them parts and say, you figure it out. Or the composer would walk up and say, I have this sound in my head. You need to go figure out how to manifest that sound physically. Mm-hmm. And that's what they did. And this went on for a long time. And this is the whole John Cage. I mean, you can see all the connections here. And so that happens. And then Bill said that in the 80s-ish, when percussion manufacturing kind of changed and we started to standardize the instruments a little more, which is a great thing. As you know, traveling, it's really nice to be able to somewhat know what you're going to play wherever you go. And there was that, and then a semi-business side picked up in the percussion world. And what started to happen is formalities exploded, but there weren't very many people who, well, sorry, I shouldn't say exploded first. There were a few people who were dabbling and trying to make it explode. And then it did explode, but there wasn't a repertoire to support the explosion. And so what you have are people who started writing themselves pieces. Also great, totally great, because there's a complete need and a complete hole, and just great timing to have people. And so I would just throw out some names like Gordon Stout, Lee Howard Stevens, the one who helped contribute to this explosion. The Method of Movement book was just extraordinary. And I'm not panning or ripping on anyone, just throwing that out there. I'm just throwing out names for a quick historical perspective.
Yeah, sure.
And so then this continues, and that's great. Then this is where things get a little dodgy in my mind. There starts to become more and more of these people writing pieces for themselves, which is great because it's bringing attention to the instrument, and that should never be forgotten. That's something that is of extreme importance. Essentially, our number one recruiting tools is just the fact that we're out there playing and reaching kids of all ages. It doesn't matter how you do that. Just by doing that, it's awesome. And so we have this thing sort of happen, and more people are writing for it. And then what seems to happen is composers start attending concerts of these players. And on the concerts are pieces by the players. And then the composers go, oh, I can write like that. And so in my conversation with Bill, he sort of showed this interesting circle of, at first the composer came and challenged the performer, right? Composer had a thought in their brain, a sound, figure it out. And then the composer went to the concert. The percussionist is up there doing their thing. And the composer goes, I can write something like that. And so then you have a bit of a switch as far as who's challenging whom and how that challenge is going to influence the development of the repertoire. And that interests me greatly because as Bill and I were talking, he was waxing nostalgic for the old days, you know, so to speak. But I would be waxing nostalgic to work with Stravinsky again as well. You know, if I had a personal relationship with Stravinsky, I would want to do that too.
Sure.
So then what, in my mind, what I started to look at was not the composer percussion marimba people themselves, such as yourself, which you do. And I kudos. I applaud anyone who composes. I think that's great. My main issue stems from the flattening or two-dimensionality. I can't even say that word. The flattening. I'm just going to stick with that.
I like the flattening.
Of
That's
all,
nice.
The flattening of repertoire on a standard sheet. And so when you get to a master's recital or a doctoral recital, or if you're on stage at Carnegie Hall and you're giving a recital, we're looking at all of these pieces the same, whereas in my mind, the pieces written, most of them, notice I threw that out there. I'm trying. I said most of them. Most of them, I feel, are technique based, and they are wonderful tools because what they do is they help a younger student develop the necessary control, touch, sensitivity to then create, to then play, other works and, build up their musicality and artistry. But I don't put those pieces. I say those pieces are tools to get to the artistry standpoint, but I don't see those pieces themselves as being the art.
Yeah, I totally understand, and I totally know what you're saying. I think that, and sorry, podcast listeners, because I think you've heard this spiel before, but it might have been a good 100 episodes ago or so. I think this is a natural way of things, and like you said, percussion's new. And I kind of stumbled on this idea in class Nancy Zeltzman taught. She wanted us to arrange, transcribe, or what's the other word she called it? Adapt, make an adaptation or an arrangement of an unknown piece. And, if you go to imslp.org, which I think we all know is the big online archive of public domain material. So if there is something of Beethoven you need or Bach you need, you can probably find some version of it there. But if you just browse around the Bs, and I can even screen share for you all right now, just so you really get the sense of this. If you just browse around the Bs, like, dude, who are all these people? There are so many. And some you'll know. I mean, some you'll like, of course, your big composers, and then depending on who you talk to, someone will know someone here or there. But dude, nobody knows all these composers. And what I discovered in this class as I was poking around looking for a rep to arrange or transcribe or adapt, so much of the stuff I found just sucked. Like it's like root position chords. It's mostly piano. I was looking at piano music and just like these really square themes. It seemed like there was like what sounded like mistakes in the music, as in like wrong notes. And there's just this giant sea of composers. And again, like who are these people? Well, I think that, you mentioned that you don't like how we write for our hands, but like Beethoven wrote for his hands and for other pianists' hands. Mozart wrote for hands. Everyone, I mean, there used to be this art to composition, and it was called orchestration. Like, yes, it needs to fit on the violin. I mean, that was a whole other art. Like Rimsky-Korsakov has a orchestration book. There's a whole thing on like making it work. And it is definitely a new 20th, I mean, it's a new thing in the 20th century, especially, and especially to percussionists, like you mentioned, Bill Craft's story, just like, hey, I have this idea, good luck, make it work. I hope you can figure it out. But I don't think that used to be the expectation. I mean, in the past, that was just called lazy composition. It's like, no, you're not done composing yet. You have to make it lay well on the instrument. You have to make it work. You don't get to just go like, oh, I have this vision. Here you go. Bye bye. The other instrumentalists, at least some time ago, I don't think they put up with that. Whereas we're so desperate for rep that we'll just like take anything. Like, yes, we'll figure it out. Yes, the end of Rebond's B. We'll make that work, even though you can't be done. And that's fine. I don't mind that it can't be done. I think it's still great music. But my point being with this whole IMSLP demonstration, I really do think like go find a no-name composer and pick it out. I think you really might find there's a lot of bad rap. Like there's a lot of stuff that
Dude,
I think
there's a lot of bad stuff being written today by full-time composers.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think it'll survive.
And there is
Yeah. And just
and
like there
you
are
could argue
more
that this other stuff didn't survive
like
hundreds
yeah,
of years
exactly.
ago.
Like we don't that's exactly my point. We don't know who any of these no name unknown last name B's are, and we're just scrolling through looking for Bloch and Bach and Beethoven. We don't know who any of them are because it won't survive, but it takes a lot of time for good composers to emerge who also know the idiosyncrasies of the instrument. So we need Beethoven and Bartok, who are great pianists, by the way, and Rachmaninoff, who all had chops like crazy and could really, really play it and know their instrument. We need composers who really understand how the instrument works and what lays on it, but are also good composers. So those are the people that smart composers, I mean, the composers you mentioned who said like, oh, look at that, I can write like that. Well, they're just not very smart. That's just a dumb idea. Like, dude, your work's not over. But we need composers like the big giants who knew the instrument well, but also really composed. They're the ones who we look to say, okay, how do you write good piano music? Someone asked me, hey, how do you write good piano music? I want something like blistering virtuosic. I say like, oh yeah, go look at Heinio Eller C sharp minor etude. Go look at Brahms. Sure, yeah, Brahms. Go look at Beethoven. Pick one of the 32 piano sonatas. That's how you write for piano. You know what I mean? It's like they know both. They know what works and what lays well, and they also know how to compose. I think we're just going through that also.
To a degree, I think we are, but at the same time, we are. Let's see here. Yeah, I think yeah the aspect of an evolution of an instrument or development of repertoire, it's not a finite thing. It's not something that any instrument had ever fully figured out a plan of action and decided this is how we're going to tackle this kind of thing. Time is definitely what it really comes down to. Is we need time to let things flush out, let ideas flush out. That's definitely true. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think for me, the main issue is I find it disingenuous for people to tell people that X Etude by Marimba Joe is
Marimba
this
Joe.
on par. Marimba, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Is on par with Druckmann's Reflections on the Nature of Water. And I've seen so much of this with this sort of, as I referred to it as this flattening, where people are looking at these competition lists. And I mean, look at these competition lists, man, and they are the majority, vast majority of the pieces are either written by marimbas or they're Bach transcriptions.
Mm-hmm.
And then with a smattering of some of the, what's interesting, that most people refer to them as classics. They refer to like the classics of our repertoire. And on that list of classics, it's pretty much all composer-based music. And so I find it interesting when on one hand, someone will say, you know, we need all of this, but then they say, but yes, you should play one of the classic pieces. And classic means Druckmann,
Mm-hmm.
Some of the Japanese marimba music that we all know is unbelievable. But it's just so interesting to see all of that and to say, like, man, why don't we get more composers in here and commission more pieces? My approach to getting through the time aspect that you referred to, which is true, right? We need more time. Well, my solution to that is to, if everyone commissioned 100 pieces, well, holy crap, we would have a lot of pieces from composers. And of those 100, so you mentioned I've commissioned, premiered 100. It's now it's about 150 pieces, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I love commissioning, and that's just a personal thing. You know, I don't have anything against someone in a group or an early music ensemble who doesn't do that. Everyone goes his or her their own path. I love commissioning, and out of all of these commissions, are any of my commissions going to make it into the canon? I don't know, and I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't bother me. It doesn't keep me up at night. What I do know is that by trying to push the envelope, I'm part of pushing the walls of percussion, and so that we were scrunched, and I feel like we just need more space. And by commissioning, that is my solution for getting us there.
Yeah. I guess I don't know if I feel so I guess you feel a responsibility almost to like get us there faster. Accountability.
I call it personal. Yeah, definitely.
And who are we accountable to?
Who are we accountable to? Our discipline.
Uh-huh. Yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah, I like
so
that.
like I'm an artist who plays percussion, and part of my responsibility of being a percussionist is to do the best I can for the development and future use of percussion. And so for me, I see that as expanding it more and more, because we're at an incredible time for percussion. I think that's one thing that people, especially young percussionists, need to realize. In the new music world, a world that I am very much a part of right now, percussion is the instrument. You don't go any ensemble, any competition, any piece that doesn't have like X instruments and percussion. It always has percussion, because we are flipping hot stuff right now, which means we, like, you know, what is it? Jump while the stove is, what is it? act while the stove's hot. I forget. I'm not good with idioms or adages, but strike while the iron's hot. Got it.
Okay.
So what I mean is, we're 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 really good, and plus, technically, we've come a long way, and we can do some things with our hands that are absolutely unbelievable. Um, and I love that. And one of the reasons why we can is because of those early marimba composers and percussion composers I was mentioning before. I think that has truly developed our technique to a point, but I feel like maybe we've done a pretty good job there, and maybe it's time to keep pushing on a different area, which is to talk to these composers about more pieces from their perspective on percussion.
Don't you think a smart composer would take a percussionist composition, like say one of mine, and say, okay, this piece sucks. I'm not going to write like this, but I'm going to study it just the way I would study violin fingerings and harp pedalings to figure out to start to get a library of what lays well and what's possible and what's idiomatic. I mean, isn't that what smart composers do?
I would definitely hope so. But let's go back and say um, you're doing faculty recitals at JMU, and your students are playing things, and there are undergraduate music majors who then go on to composition and so forth, but their basis of knowledge is only that. And so then in their mind, it's stuck. Like, this is what can be done. And so, yes, I want them studying your stuff, because for anyone out there who has not watched you play, your hands are sick, dude.
Well, thanks.
Seriously. You got some crazy, crazy ass hands. In fact, I think some of your pieces are called some crazy hand things, but
yeah,
that's
sure.
Probably for a reason. So yes, they should definitely be contacting you, studying that stuff. It is orchestration to a degree. When you have that as, not saying you're giving them this is the answer, but if they're growing up in a system that is showing this as the majority, then the minority is, you see how it kind of gets turned around.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I've seen the extreme opposite mistake happen a lot of times. Like if I have to teach one more master class where a freshman's playing rebonds who just can't play it, like I also think we're in danger of smothering our best rep. So, you mentioned Druckmann, which I do think is like one of the best marimba pieces we have out there. The piece by Jacob Druckmann, Reflections on the Nature of Water. And I do think pieces like that, like I used to tour around with rebonds. I've just heard it too much, and I've heard it done badly too much. I feel like we killed it. Like I know there's people out there, still gets played a ton. It's hardly dead. I mean, but like for me, it's just like done. I still teach it. I almost always have a student playing rebonds. I don't think since coming to JMU, especially, I haven't had someone playing rebonds, at least one student at a time. But like when we do go to these young kids who say they just got into college, they're really stoked about composition, and they have the mindset and the attitude and the approach that a lot of young composers do, which is simply like, oh man, I want to write video game music, I want to write film music, or I want to write pop music. And then the first thing their teacher does is shove Alvin Lucier and Xenakis and Penderecki like down their throat. And they're like, this is what you should be liking. This is what you should be liking. The thing I've seen is a really bad backsplash effect where they're just really turned off by that music. And I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, learning new music was a very step-by-step process. It's an acquired taste. Like heavy dissonant music is an acquired taste. So I feel like, okay, the first really dissonant piece a kiddo I would introduce them to is not Penderecki violin caprice. It's Charles Ives' unanswered question. It's like nobody just drinks black coffee right away and loves it. You start with tons of cream and you graduate down to black coffee. Then once you're really used to it, you never go back. I mean, and I remember thinking when I was an undergraduate student, my teacher was I mean, he has his doctorate in composition. He was a huge advocate of new music, but I think he was also very, very realistic about, and by the way, he studied with Bill Kraft, but um, he was very realistic about when to introduce it, and I think he was very hip to this concept. It's much more of a role of a parent than a like advocate for new music, because he would show me something like Varese or something, and I'd be like, oh, I don't get it because I'm 19, and he'd be like, okay, you don't get it right now, but you will someday. So he'd like dial it back next time, and next time it was Shostakovich Scherzo or something. It was way more, and then I went like, whoa, that is really cool. And then, okay, you just like gradually get dragged down this deeper rabbit hole that is new music. And my buddy and I, we discovered Steve Reich on our own, and we discovered Xenakis on our own, and we thought we found like this big secret. We thought it was so cool because it was ours, and we found it on our own, and we're like, whoa, this is awesome. This is like our teacher doesn't know about this, and it's so cool. And there's this group called the Kronos Quartet, and they like commission shit. No, that's so hip, cool. And like we thought we were so damn cool. And then you go to grad school, and everyone's like, oh yeah, it's so much better when it's your discovery, is my point. So I think it's a mistake to take these young folks who are on the first rung of the ladder to get to an honest appreciation of 20th century music and just skip 10 steps and say like, hey, here you go. It's early Gretzky music and it's Grisey, and here you go. This is what you should like. I've just not seen it work. The people I've seen gain a true appreciation for this, not a pretentious appreciation for it. And what I mean by a pretentious appreciation is that they go, oh, okay, this is academic. This is what I'm supposed to like. And you say, hey, why is Xenakis cool? And they say, well, because it's mathematical. Like, dude, that's not why it's cool. Have you ever? I come from a family of my father's a mathematician, my sister's a statistician. I tell them the stuff we think is cool about Xenakis, and they're just like, oh, really? That's okay. You guys think that's cool, huh? All right, interesting. I don't know why that is. It's hardly that. Anyway, but that's my opinion. Like, I think as far as the treatment of students, if you want them to have the appreciation for what you're considering the really good rep, it's a much more patient process. So when you're at that recital and you're going to show them stuff to play, I think it's okay. Like have a variety, and while we're talking about stuff that pisses us off, the thing that pisses me off is, I mean, aside from this approach we're talking about and this like false pretentious appreciation for this like hyper intellectual music, because I think a lot of people out there, they advocate it so much and they talk about it so much and they put it up really high and they more use it as an excuse to say, look how smart I am. But I'm not sure they actually know anything about it. I'm really not sure. And a lot of young people get that in their minds, and then they do the same thing and they just go like, oh man, I'm so like hyper intellectual and I'm on another level. And it's like, I don't know if you are. You know what I mean? I think it's like Dali and Matisse and Picasso. They all are brilliant classical painters. Like you look at their early stuff when they're some of them, like, I mean, Matisse, like I think it's Matisse, like 12 years old, he's painting this like brilliant landscape that's just like photographic perfect. They say you got to know the rules in order to break them, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if I believe in that, but that's an example of that. I feel like you gotta have a basis so you actually know the value of these broken rules, you know. So I don't know. I think to worry about them when they're this young, I don't know if I personally don't worry about it so much. I say like, oh cool, you're not into Chelsea right now. And that's, dude, I wouldn't expect you to be. You're 19, That's okay. You'll get to it. You're not into Chelsea. Well, let's try unanswered question. Let's start there. Let's try Shostakovich String Quartet 8, you know. I've seen that mistake a lot. Yeah, and I think so many percussionists especially are out there kicking and screaming, just saying like, please let us into your little classical music club, and please consider us as intellectual, as um, vetted and as important as all the rest of the reps. So they go like, look, we have a piece by Xenakis. Look, we have a Varese. Look, we have a Alvin Lucier. You know, and we like shake it so like it's a big prize, and it is. They're all good pieces. But I think in shaking them, we literally smother them. You know, and we have soft playing bone alphabet who shouldn't even go near it. And we have freshmen playing
Very
rebound
true.
who shouldn't go near it, all in the name of like, we have good reps. Like, dude, you're killing our good rep. Please stop doing that. You know, they can play let them play French Suite first. Like, do you know how many people their first percussion solo is rebonds? Come on, dude. That's just, that's not smart. You just want good rep, you know? So anyway,
Right.
rant over. Oh, I was going to tell you what pisses me off. Something that does piss me off is this whole like trying to put pop music onto, let's pick on marimba especially, because like I do like pop music, I do like rock music, and dude, like the timbre does matter because dude, you're gonna like it's just thin. It needs bass and drums. It's just like a pop music tease. Please stop teasing. It's like insulting to both. Like you're insulting the voice of the marimba and what it can do, and you're insulting pop music. It's not this like cool crossover,
Uh,
like, oh yeah, I'm so progressive because I'm knocking down the walls, man. No, you're not. Like pop music's everywhere. You don't need to bring pop music to the recital hall. It doesn't need any help. It's doing great. Like, yeah, just like you're diminishing both by trying to do that in such a sloppy way.
I don't have much of an opinion because I wouldn't be playing the marimba then anyway, right? Because I love it so much. um, yeah, so I don't know about I've definitely concur with what you're saying about the pseudo intellectuality of things, and there's always some of that going on for all disciplines, for scientists to teachers to percussionists. There's an element of that going on, but that's not even an area that I even think a ton about. I simply am thinking about expanding our repertoire. Um, that's really what's on my mind, what's constantly on my mind, um, and for me, that just keeps coming back to composers, educating composers, of course, because it's part of our job and responsibility to, if asked, and and through performances or recordings, video recordings, audio recordings, that still is an educational tool to get to composers and to let them know what's possible. But the danger is, from my perspective, the danger is a different side, which is why we're having this conversation. In that we limit their creative thinking too much. So we're forcing them into our technique area, and instead of letting them dream more. And so it's
But
the
who's
balance that I
where's
think
where's
that
the
we need
forcing?
to come up with.
I'm sorry.
Forcing through education, through only showing or limiting uh, what's played or what's seen at a percussion ensemble concert when they're only pieces by percussionists, or uh, another piece for solo marimba and quartet that essentially is marimba spiritual part 540, and you get all of that, and then I find that problematic because we're bringing them back to this notion of technique based music where there are these parameters of music. So it's not it's not 100% defined, but there's something like they're different numbers, but 8 parameters of music. That's basically musical components that can be found in any piece of music, and without them, it wouldn't be a piece of music. And those are things like melody, harmony, form, rhythm, texture, density, dynamic. Did I say tone, or I don't
Timbre.
know?
Yeah.
Timbre, yeah. And what I think we do unintentionally is we are continuing the dominance of melody and harmony and form over some of these other parameters. So why can't we let them dream in terms of texture and density and tone or timbre and rhythm and dynamics as compared to quarter note equals 120, 4/4, X major. Like, when you start getting that sheer volume of stuff out there, then when they start researching, hey, I want to write this piece, and they Google it, which is what people generally would do these days, they're going to come up with what I believe is an imbalance. Right or wrong, I still think there are good things and everything, but I see this imbalance happening. And because of the imbalance, it could actually skew people's thought processes to essentially recreating the wheel.
Yeah. What do you, maybe it's worth elaborating just a little bit on what you mean by technique driven, because I think I know what you mean, because I've heard you speak a little on this type of thing before, but I wonder if you'd elaborate a little for our listeners.
Yeah, so keep in mind, I'm speaking in more extreme terms for purposes of argument. Of course, there are, I don't know what percent will fall along this, and there are always exceptions, but my feel of technique-based things on marimba would be basically, you hold that beautiful open fifth here, so you get C, G, and then G sharp, D sharp, and you just up and down the instrument. And you're basically taking different permutations and combinations that Lee Howard Stevens already wrote down, and you're making this flashy rhythmic thing up and down the instrument, slapping a very, very romantic name on it, like, I don't know, clouds in the nighttime. And
yeah, those titles are always like moon
they're great, aren't
reflections.
they?
Yeah,
exactly.
or like, yeah, Starlight Lullaby or something. Yeah, those titles. I know what you're talking about. Well, let me ask you
And
something.
so the technique, sorry, what I mean is technique is a primary driving point. So it's a tool to teach a very specific technique thing. Like, we're going to work on independent rolls. So here is an etude. People call them compositions. An etude and composition, you can argue, are different things, but here's an etude that works this, right? Just like finger power for piano, or the Czerny etudes for piano, right? They work different aspects of the fingers to strengthen them, to give you more dexterity, so you can play certain pieces, or you progress. And so these technique pieces that I refer to, I'm referring to them in that way. I don't necessarily mean idiomatic. Not necessarily. I think they're not mutually exclusive.
I've heard this discussion before, and I think we both dislike the same types of pieces, the starlight reflection title kind of pieces, and or
it's a good one. So you gotta
Moonlight Ghosts. I hate that damn piece. That's not a real piece, everybody, but yeah,
I hope not.
This might be a joke just Cory and I are having. I'm not sure, but I think we dislike the same pieces, or not. Maybe I'm just not crazy about them. I don't know if dislike might be too strong a word, but You mentioned these permutations moving around different chords, and I guess I would just ask real quickly, do you dislike Bach C major prelude, well-tempered clavier, ba 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 bee ba ba bee ba 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 bee ba ba bee do 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 dee do do dee? Do you dislike that?
Do I dislike the composition, or
Yeah,
for
yeah.
my
The
playing it on my instrument?
just you dislike the composition because it is exactly that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of those Bach preludes and
Sorry.
a lot of Baroque
Sorry.
preludes that kind of makes you look. The sunlight behind you makes you look divine. Yeah, exactly. You look
There we
divine.
go. Angels in the night.
Do you dislike those pieces because they do exactly that? It's this, in fact, it's one of the tenets of a lot of Baroque music. You take this one outline, this one permutation, and of course that's a comfortable keyboard fingering. And Bach cello, it's the same thing. It's a comfortable cello fingering, or at least idiomatically it works. And then you simply lay it over new harmony, because I think we generally like those pieces, but these marimba pieces we're talking about we don't like. So the thing I would add to this conversation is I don't think it's the fault of repetitive permutations moving around chords. It's something else. There's something more, and I think it's a mistake to tell people that's what's bad about this piece. Because if that were true, then the Bach preludes would suck, because so many of them do that, but we tend to like those, or at least generally. I mean, I think a lot of people really, really like those. I like those. You know.
Yeah, I also, yes, I definitely see what you're saying. There are other elements that go into the composition besides the
Yeah,
technique or besides the hand patterns and permutations.
yeah. I think the offense is
Mainly,
deeper.
we get a harmony where there's really just two chords for the whole thing, and we get one meter that is like, it's like solid. Well, that's true with figure bass, but yeah, there's not a whole lot of complexity, and there doesn't always need to be. But one thing that I struggle with is we always go back to these historical arguments, right? But we're not in the 1600s. The year is 2020, and we have those 420 years of history that have already developed in the Western classical landscape. So why do we have to go back? Why can't we
Well,
continue to push forward?
well, I guess my point is those pieces from the 1600s that commit the same offense, we're not annoyed by. So why is it they commit the same permutation moving through around different harmonies offense, but yet we really like them? And my answer is, well, that's not the offense. That's the thing we notice, but the offense might be something deeper.
Oh, yeah, there's more. That does offend me, I guess. It doesn't really offend me. Um, I don't like that about it, but I also don't like a lot of things about these Moonlight Starstruck pieces. There's more than one thing.
Yeah,
Plenty of
but
things.
well, and I guess that's what I'm saying. I think it's a mistake to pin it down to things that are idiomatic, because that is apparently not true. You know, Beethoven Tempest Sonata is very idiomatic, but I think generally it's considered a really
Yeah,
wonderful piece of music. So to say,
that's
okay,
true.
the problem with Cangelosi's whatever, and I know you didn't say that about my music, but I'm just going to criticize myself. The problem with Cangelosi's whatever is that it's idiomatic. It's like, well, no, it might suck for a
No,
lot of reasons, but idiomatic is good. Like, good
no,
music is
that's
idiomatic. We need more idiomatic music, I think.
well. I'll agree and disagree. The first part about that, I agree with. The idiomatic thing doesn't make or break it, but I don't think that it's necessarily good, and I don't necessarily think we need more. But that's a personal aesthetic choice. That's not a value judgment on the repertoire. But that's
Sure.
why when I choose to commission, I'm choosing to commission composers who are aesthetically thinking about things in a different way, right? I'm not looking to commission, well, you or Marimba Joe, who I mentioned
Uh-huh.
earlier, whoever that is.
Uh-huh.
That's not who I would look
Sure.
to commission,
Sure.
which is fine. But I think one of the other things that, well, I don't even know if I want to go down this path, so maybe I shouldn't. But how many of these composers, marimba composers, percussion composers, ever wrote a solo piece for bassoon? How
Yeah.
many of them wrote a chamber piece for harp, violin, piano, and soprano?
Mhm.
I would argue that the vast majority have never done anything that didn't involve a marimba. Maybe there was another instrument,
Mhm.
but it probably starts here and then they try to pull some in. How many have written a piano concerto?
And I don't know
Um,
if that, I'm not, I hear you and I think you're right, very few, but I'm not sure if that validates, or I think all it would show is they didn't go down the regular composition path. And in fact, I've always had
yeah,
a
but
really,
it actually means that they've studied. That's the other thing. They've studied. They put in the time to figure out the idiomatic workings of the instruments, to study orchestration, to study history, to see where it all comes from, so that when they're writing, there's more depth to the content that they're creating. The thing with Marimba Joe's
maybe.
piece is
I
I find
mean,
that it's very surface level, and it might make me do this for a few minutes,
uh
but then when it's done, it's done.
yeah, I guess I just think like citation needed because I mean Caspar Cassido has got like famous cello suite that only cellists know about. It's not a composer we've heard of, but man, cellists
Well,
play that piece.
keep in
Yeah.
mind that there's everything I'm saying. There's an exception to the rule, so there are definitely
Yeah.
exceptions, um, and I completely acknowledge the exceptions and am not afraid to admit that. But I guess it spending that amount of time studying composition, living and breathing composition, helps develop your voice, your aesthetic, and what kind of art you're trying to put out into the world. And one of the issues I have is a business perspective of the marimba composer, where the business aspect fuels the pieces as compared to the other way around. And I, that's a different can of worms. But I think it's one worth mentioning because you were so astute to bring up earlier that it's not just the idiomatic thing, or it's not just the technique driven stuff that is problematic behind some of those pieces. And I agree. It's not just that. It's probably just the easiest thing to label it as, in all honesty. But the business thing definitely drives me some, as does the years of study and devotion to getting your voice and your aesthetic into your art.
Yeah, what you're saying reminds me a little bit of a few years ago at PASIC. Christopher Dean gave a great talk, and he was asking people to please keep pushing. And I don't think he was qualifying what pushing can mean a lot of things. It can mean
Yeah.
in virtuosity, it can mean in composition exploration, but you know, that turned on a little light for me with a saying that I guess Al Oddie says. I've just heard he says this from various people. Al Oddie's from Black Earth Percussion, one of the first percussion ensembles ever, and now percussion group Cincinnati. Alan Oddie says, "Oh, I miss the good old days of new music." Because there has been this like, and I think it's sort of this pop music thing I'm talking about, but there has been this kind of recession in progress and sort of this resignation to, well, I'm just going to sell stuff that will, sorry, I'm just going to write stuff that will
Rise
sell.
up. Yeah,
And yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, certainly. Yeah,
I refer to
that's,
that as the post minimal
yeah,
music,
yeah,
because
yeah, I gotcha.
minimalism is still going. It's still going.
Right. Yeah, I got you. I got you. Yeah, that's a tricky one because I feel like I'm right in that place. Like I'm definitely selling music and publishing music, and it's like it's a big part of my livelihood, and it definitely was a big part
Which
of my livelihood.
is Yeah,
before
and
the
that's
job,
and
you know.
that's completely fine. You know, something that you and some of the other people I should be proud of is making a career as percussionist or just in music is extremely difficult. And so being able to monetize and successfully implement a business plan is always to be commended. So I never knock anyone if they're making money off of it. It's more of if you're a university and you get commission funds, then I start to do this. I start to get a little when
Did
I
you
see
say
where the money
did you say
like
commission funds?
yeah,
Commission funds.
like
Okay.
commissioning funds. Like you get $2,000 to commission a piece for your percussion ensemble concert, and
Okay.
it goes to Marimba Joe. I have a personal problem with that. Personal. I feel like
Yeah.
that should not be going to Marimba Joe. Um,
So
but
it
that's
sounds
my
like
absolutist standpoint. So
so it sounds like well, and it sounds like the point of contention here is just that of opinion. So the person who
yeah,
commissions
definitely.
Marimba Joe versus Lucas Ligety, they think Marimba Joe is better or just as good or affordable or something. So maybe the thing you need to do is try to convince more percussionists that hey, Marimba Joe is not as good as Lucas Foss,
I
Lucas Ligety.
I don't. No, I don't agree with the value judgment part because I don't go for the good or bad. I'm thinking about what kind of piece can have this impact on our repertoire development. Um, the good or the bad, I don't know because Lucas Lickety, who lives here in LA now, and dude, super cool guy. I've
Oh,
listened
cool.
to his discography, and I have to say, some of his pieces aren't great.
Yep.
And I can say that about every single composer. So the
Sure.
good and bad thing is not my deal to tell or my decision to make. What is my decision to make is where I I see the future of our instrument and how I can best contribute to achieving my goal as a professional percussionist in developing the repertoire.
But did I understand right that you're rubbed the wrong way when someone would take commission funds and give them to Marimba Joe versus someone
Oh,
who's a
that pisses me off. Yeah, it pisses me
right.
off, but
So
I'm not. It doesn't
sure. So
necessarily affect me.
so yeah, that's what I'm wondering is and I think that's fine that it pisses you off. That's cool. But like the point of contention, like the difference between you and the person who commissioned Marimba Joe is just that of their personal taste and opinion for music, right? So the goal you should have.
Maybe
So right.
it
So
could
what's
also
if it's
be.
not just their opinion, then I guess what's the offense? Is it that they're trying to put money into their friends'
I
hands, or
think
what do you think it
no,
is?
no, no. I think it's a safety outlet. I think it's safe to go for Marimba Joe as compared to Lucas Ligety, or the plethora of young composers in their 20s and 30s that you could commission for the same fee of some of these people and end up with 12 pieces to fit two whole percussion ensemble concerts, and that's pretty phenomenal.
Do
Um,
you
what you, yeah,
do you think they might be going with Marimba Joe because they want to make sure the music will be playable for their students, and when they say, "Hey, I need the piece to not be any more difficult than Delacluse one for the drums, French Suite for the multi percussion, and Mishi for the keyboard players." Marimba Joe is going to go, "I know exactly what you're talking about," and like, boom, out comes your piece, and it's ready, it's done. There aren't five note chords in the marimba parts. There aren't low E's
yeah,
below the F in the vibraphone. There aren't Chris Hollies written in the wrong octave, so forth. So, I mean, So I mean, I think a lot of people agree with you, but it's just a matter of practicality why they might commission Marimba Joe. Because
Yeah,
I know I've seen those pieces all the
practicality
time. Like
could.
I'll try so hard to play a piece of new music or a piece by one of these, quote, real composers, and just be like, shoot, man, I just can't play it. Like there's so many things wrong with it. They just don't know my instrument, like they just, and rather go like, oh, I'm
Well,
so
I
grateful to
mean,
have a real composer. It's just like, dude, we have like we're on a time budget here. I think that
that's
happens a
true.
lot.
Yeah, that definitely happens. But I would point to the whole premise behind Bone Alphabet with Steve Schick and Brian Ferneyhough. It was essentially a challenge, and Ferneyhough lost the challenge. And the
Yeah, because
challenge
people
was
can play it
to
now.
write, because Schick sat down and played it. So what we see as impossible may not actually be impossible. So I guess for me, I'd rather have a score that is 80% complete with 20% mistakes,
Hmm.
but but those mistakes you can teach, you can fix, you can talk about, but the 80% you can't. That's from the composer, and I'd rather get that than a 20% piece from Marimba Joe.
Sure.
80%, that's how I feel
What? Yeah, yeah.
about
No,
it.
that's a cool point. What do you think about? I think also in here is the message you're sending to the students, which I think we both agree is valuable. And one thing, again, this is all just hypothetical, but one reason to commission someone who's going to have everything like tidy and done and correct and playable and within the ranges and so on and so forth is you're then sending a message to the students and you're saying like, hey, look, someone who like did their preparation and knew their stuff is the person we commission. It's not the person who writes a note that doesn't exist on the instrument and so on and so forth. That's a really good message. Plus, you may be trying to encourage the students. You want to get something that they're going to have a positive experience with. And Marimba Joe might speak a 19-year-old's language a little more than um, than Lucas Ligeti.
Yeah,
So
but
again, you're
would you
trying to not shove something. You're not trying to shove step 10 down their throat when really they're at step 2, so that they do that. They climb that ladder I mentioned a good while ago of like, I'm going to come
but
to an appreciation of 20th century music on my own timeline, and it's going to be my
yeah,
discovery.
but what if, I mean, don't you think Marimba Joe's piece kind of already exists in the repertoire somewhere?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, it might.
So why can't they dig out another one that's already working?
Yeah, and I've literally told that to people before. Like I've gotten commission offers, and they say, "I want a piece that's like this and does that and like that," and I would just say like, "That's actually
You mean
I
like that
already,
piece?
yeah, or I already have a piece like that. Would
Oh
you
yeah,
mind? I would
nice.
love it if you would just play that, please." But they, I don't know, for some reason they want a new one, and I don't know, and I think in their mind they are doing what you would like to do from a different angle. They are expanding the
Right.
left from a different corner. You're attacking it from over here, and they're attacking it from down here for the opinion and mindset of their students. And, I guess, yeah. Sorry, I kind of lost my thought there, but I think there's of course taste. Like you like this type of music, they like this other type of music, but
Yeah.
then I think there's also all these other variables. Like it drives me crazy when um, a student of mine has a room checked out, and then a faculty member, let's hypothetically say, says like, "Oh, sorry, can I have the room for my class?" And then I have to explain to the student, "Oh, shoot, we really should give the faculty member priority because it's a class." And the student says, "Wait, but I signed the room out. I did everything I was supposed to do. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to be organized. I'm supposed to plan ahead. Why does this faculty member get it? And by the way, how do you get to be a faculty member when you're not organized and you don't plan ahead?" It's a bad message. it's a bad message. You're trying so hard to, you're like begging the students to be organized and to plan ahead and check out the room when you're supposed to. And then you have people in the job positions that they aspire to be like, and they do the opposite. I think it's the same thing. Like only the like really well versed and people with only the really good understanding of percussion are the ones who are going to get the commissions. Maybe that's what this person was thinking when they commissioned Marimba Joe, because they send a different message to their students that way. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, that can definitely be part of it. There's simply a rock star aspect of things where people get popularized, and then people are jumping on the bandwagon to commission that person for the next thing. But that relates to they're trying to recruit students, they're trying to build a program, they have the PR aspect, maybe they're making videos, or maybe they're going to apply for PASIC to do a showcase concert, and they haven't received tenure yet, and so their tenure portfolio is very important. So all of that is true, and you can't eliminate all those factors, but all those factors are not necessarily about the future art of percussion.
Yeah.
So,
do you think they contribute to it? I feel like this is very much close territory to the marching band discussion. Like, people often say like, why do we have to do marching band still? And da 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 da. It's like, well, this one type of music that is vastly popular and sells tickets and gets a really big crowd is needed and necessary for this other music to exist. So, I look at our department of music. We have a great contemporary music festival, and we just had Bright Shang here, and we've had Stephen Hartke, and we've had Augusta Reed Thomas, and in the past they've had Steve Reich. And it's a good, healthy contemporary music festival. But there's also, we have this giant popular 400-piece marching band that, like, if we didn't have that, I doubt we would be able to have all this other stuff going on. Like, we wouldn't be able to do new music at all if it wasn't for these other things. So I think, just like you're saying, sure, like the professor needs tenure, or they're jumping on a bandwagon that's going to attract kids or give their program some notice or something, which, by the way, we definitely do that with new composers. It's just like Alejandro Viñao could just wipe his ass with anything, and we would just like, and I'm not saying his pieces are bad, I think they're great, but we would just instantly be all over it. Everyone would be tackling the new piece the day of, and I think that is more so than any. I don't think you can name a single Marimba Joe that would have that effect, where like everyone just doggy piles. Yeah, you see that giant tail. But that's just my experience. So what was I getting at? Oh yeah, so maybe the person who has to do the commission that you wouldn't do, but has to do it for the sake of recruiting or for notoriety or just to get noticed by younger students who share those same tastes. It helps later, because if they teach those kids well, and they teach them right, and they let them climb this ladder of acquired taste that I've described so many times, hey, they're all going to be new music advocates, like totally following what you believe after 4 years. And it's just 4 years, not long. Like, they might not have even started if they hadn't had that piece of Marimba Joe, whatever literature.
Oh yeah, and my college auditions were rhythm song. That's what I played, and so I completely get that. And without that, I wouldn't have gotten to study with Professor Burritt and gone on to crazy weird things. But I definitely see that it's the, but I see it for what that kind of is. I see this system, and I guess, like you put it before, and like we knew going into this, I'm pushing at it from over here, and you're from over there, and Marimba Joe from over here, and right. But
Yeah.
without those extremes, nothing would be pushed on, and that's even more problematic to say the least, in my opinion. That if there's no pushing going on in any direction, then it's going to be stagnant, and stagnancy is akin to a death sentence. That's like, in my mind, the most unfathomable thing that we could possibly do is not have these extremes. So
So
I
maybe
welcome them with open arms.
so did I change your opinion a little bit? Like maybe you don't mind the Marimba Joe Commission anymore because you are saying it's okay as long as we're pushing from some directions and especially different directions at the same time.
Yeah, so the one aspect that I haven't thought about a lot, and part of that is because I've been a freelancer my whole career. I haven't taught anywhere, been full time in an orchestra. It's all been freelance projects, recording work, commissioning, and et cetera, et cetera. And after so long, you definitely lose sight of the university system and what that kind of brings with it. And I guess when I was a student at Northwestern, which was 99 to 03, so 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, the system was different than it is today. And 20 years before that, it was way different than it was then. So I think that I've probably lost a little bit of sense of what goes into the day-to-day aspects of the university. And I'm sure that there's a tremendous amount of pressure being put on people to perform, not literally perform, but perform as far as their tenure portfolio goes. And Marimba Joe would definitely check off more than one box, and is a safer box to check off
Well,
than
I mean, I
Lucas, so
certainly
to speak.
disagree with that. Your tenure committee doesn't know who Marimba Joe is. The amount of percussionists on your tenure committee is zero.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
true.
and
Good
even
point.
a lot of the percussion composers that we think are so famous, I mean, man, talk to a theorist, say like, oh, don't you love Mark Applebaum? Don't you love Alejandro Vignal? More than once, I've had them say, who? Like
Oh yeah,
even the
definitely.
percussion, even the people we have writing for us that we think aren't in like the percussion sphere, they're not necessarily on everyone else's radars either, necessarily. Actually,
Yeah.
I have to heartily disagree with the Marimba Joe Commission being more advantageous for, say, tenure than a, let's say, Augusta Reed Thomas Commission. That would go far, far further in a tenure profile
No,
because they know who
I
she is.
guess sorry that I misconstrued that. What I meant is that would check a lot of boxes from like a studio recruiting and ensemble standpoint. For the
Sure,
points you made earlier about the younger kids, getting them into things, that would
that
definitely
makes
check
sense.
more boxes. So that part I definitely I just hadn't thought so much about that because I'm not in that
Sure.
world, so to speak. And then from my perspective, to you and to other composers, percussionists, etc. We also have, conversely, the new music world looks at our stuff a certain way, and and we get a reputation for developing certain kinds of works, and then these composers see these works and it's laughable to them. Now, I think that's an ass thing to do. You shouldn't just that's neither here nor there. But when we want them to write us X or Y, we need all the sums talking to all the parts. And so I just feel so strongly um, about all of us sort of pushing at the same time, because that's how we get more of the message across to more people. I might be in discussion with people on the right side, You might be on the left side and someone else on the center. But if those discussions are happening, then people are getting information. And if they're getting the information, then they're being informed and they can start to develop a sense of personal taste, personal aesthetic. And then that can manifest itself in the pieces they either write or the pieces they program if they themselves go on to be a studio professor or freelance musician or band director, whatever avenue they choose to go.
Yeah, I think those great thoughts. I think it's very speculative for me. I think it's very hard to quantify how people attain certain tastes and how they come up with opinions and where they draw ideas from. And I guess we can only both draw from our personal experiences watching them do that or not do it. Um, but I think it's also, speaking of what we're teaching composers by modeling for them, like if all we're going to play is, Casey Cangelosi that fits easy on marimba, and then they're going to go, oh, okay, I can do that. At least they're seeing stuff that is idiomatic and comfortable. If they see sophomores playing rebonds and they think, oh, wow, that looks hard. I didn't realize percussion can do all that. And I didn't realize they can play 30-second notes at that tempo at the end. Wow, that's cool. Wow, sophomores can play that? Oh, this must be kind of easy. It's not easy. It's actually sending them false information. It's like, wow, seniors play con variations? Oh, okay, it must not be that hard of a piece. And you and I know, no, the kid didn't play it that well. But does the composer know that? I'm not so sure. So I'm not saying it's one modeling has specific deficits than the other, but I'm saying it's really hard to quantify what people would take from either experience. And I don't know if I would confidently decide my actions based on one or the other. I would probably more just go with what I think would be best for the students performing the recital, or what I think I can perform best, because I also think it's not just repertoire. When a student watches you perform, say at a faculty recital, they're not just learning about the repertoire. I mean, they're learning about so much stuff. They're learning about what performance is, what putting a program together is. They're learning about what's a relevant program note. They're learning about how to present yourself on stage. I mean, there's so much more is on the line than just like legit rep.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That part I totally agree with.
Cool.
That they need to watch, and it's the rep is one part of that puzzle. And as you know, being a percussionist, there's so many things they don't teach you when you get to the professional world. And then you sort of laugh at the repertoire part because you're like, really? That's what we focused on for 4 years?
Right.
Holy crap. I am so lost right now. And I have no gear to play on. Thanks a lot for telling me all of these things. That's a clear point about watching people play. I think the challenge that I would issue to, well, I'm talking to you. So, and for people who have listened this far, congratulations.
Yeah.
You guys should also know that for anyone, because you clearly knew my thoughts, and I think I've tried to temper them even a bit today, for sake of having an actual intellectual conversation. But for you to have me on, knowing how I feel in advance, should speak volumes to your character.
Oh, thanks.
Willingness to have the conversation is clear. So the challenge that I would then lay down to you or anyone in your position, but you, I mean, dude, right now you're kind of a big deal in the percussion world. I don't know if you know that. I think there are posters of you everywhere I go. I was just in Norway and there was this poster of you up like in the hallway of the conservatory. I was like, hey, I know that guy.
Oh, that's neat. Wow. I've never been to Norway actually. That's cool.
my challenge is I went on your YouTube page, okay?
Yeah.
And I could count, like, there are a lot of videos. I could count, I didn't know everything, but maybe between 5 and 10 pieces that weren't by you.
Mm-hmm.
And that were by what we would call like other composers or non-percussionist composers. My challenge would be, let's see if we can bridge the deficit a little and try to, like, I personally would be really curious to watch you play Time for Marimba.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I've seen your style in the videos over the years, and I know your pedigree. I know who you've studied with, and I'm thinking to myself, it would be really awesome to see this guy play some of this, because then you have a following too online, and that can help disseminate some of this information and say, hey, here's all my stuff, but watch, here's me playing some of this other stuff. And so that goes back to the imbalance that I was talking about earlier, about how maybe there is a way for us to get back more to this balance in the repertoire.
Sure, and thanks so much.
And sorry, I don't mean to like put you on the spot, be like, challenge accepted. I don't mean like that way.
Well, that's great. No, thanks. You said so many nice things, but I have to ask, like, in the effort of expanding our repertoire, like you said, you would like to have done, and in the effort of, I think the way you said, do we really need another Marimba Joe commission? I guess I would say, and answer your question, like, the reason I haven't been gung-ho to put up a time for marimba recording is, do we need another recording of that? Like, there are already so many good ones, and it's a piece that doesn't need any help. But is my time better spent getting more of my own ideas out there and being my own artist rather than just laying on yet another time for marimba?
What about commissions of fellow faculty members at JMU, or which I'm sure you've done oodles of, because I mean,
not oodles.
You're a percussion faculty member. I'm sure that you get asked to do that stuff, or just commissions in general to mix up the sort of thousands and thousands and thousands of views of snare drum solo X, right, versus brand new solo by Miami-based composer. I don't know. I'm making all this up. But then when you post that, or you also are teaching your students an awful lot about the process of commissioning, about seeing the project through the video aspect, the time that goes into it, the detail, and the failure part, because the failure part is way more extreme in this case, in that when I commission, the chance of like hitting a home run on a commission is a lot less than if I were to just go it alone, kind of thing. And that's okay though. It's sometimes those risks are very rewarding, and I feel that maybe we could help get word out in other ways of, hey, if you like this, you might also like this, or this piece pairs with this one. Here's my setup that I came up with for this piece, multi-piece, and this composer is writing a companion piece based off of that. Just, I don't know, just thinking now.
I think that's that's a super good suggestion just for everyone. I personally have an immediate answer, and that is like, man, I have so many ideas for my own pieces that I don't think I have a lifetime left to finish them. So it's like, but it does bring up, I think it brings up a deeper question of, you said you called everyone an artist, and that's a very personal thing to every person. So, like, I feel like the best contribution, I don't even know if it's like I'm doing it for the sake of our field, the percussion field, as much as like, dude, I just want to get this other piece out there. I just like it, and it almost hurts having it stuck up here and it needs to get out. I think it's a far more just personal existence, this whole being an artist and what you choose to play and what you choose to pour your heart into. And I certainly do play pieces by other folks, but yeah, it's like there is this like need to like, no, I really like, I don't know. Until a composer comes around that I'm really inspired to work that hard for them, there's so much good music to play. I mean, I feel like there is so much. First of all, there's so many ideas that I won't have time to finish in my lifetime, but there's also so much great rep that already exists I won't have time to finish. So I feel like I really am going to need a special person that like come, and actually one of my colleagues has finished me a piece, and I'm working on it very hard, and I'm going to record it, and that's more about
Nice.
him. Yeah, Eric Genevin, actually, who was a former of a percussion quartet. So
in fact, I was his counselor at Northwestern for
wow.
He was a high schooler the Summer High School Music Institute. Yeah, I was like his dorm counselor.
Well, he's a damn
figure,
genius of a composer. And
boy.
Sorry?
He is a smart guy. I mean, I remember him when he was 17, and he was as pensive and thoughtful then.
He's about the same still, I think. But I have to say, I mean, he's one of many brilliant composers out there. But my personal I don't know, I don't feel like I'm gonna put down the time for my own personal goals for another person unless I really feel like they are special. And that might be because they're so brilliant, or they're just another genius who's also really special. and like, so he is one of those people to me as like my colleague and friend here, and I'm definitely gonna like play the heck out of this piece. And so yeah, but like that's my personal answer to that challenge you posed of like, hey, instead of just like writing another piece of your own and putting it up on YouTube, do some other people's pieces. It's well, yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think it's very hard to police everyone's where they fall on that spectrum. Like I don't have an interest in doing that, and like it's cool. Like it sounds like maybe you want to do that some, and maybe we do need to do that some, but that feels weird to me. That feels icky. That feels like, wait, dude, that's not my business to police what you want to play and who you want to, put your most valuable time into, and what you want to like.
You mean for telling students what to play,
or telling yeah, well, students, I think it's different because you're trying to teach them, but telling like another artist what to play and to say, and like, I'm not offended, I'm not upset or anything, but I would have a hard time telling someone like, hey, you should stop playing your own stuff and you should like play some of these great composers, because I think those great composers, dude, you gotta figure out how to get your stuff played,
Yeah, and I don't see it as stop. I see it as in addition to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Which comes back to the balancing concept that I keep coming back to for the percussion world's repertoire of the last couple decades, where I just see this imbalance, and so keep trying to find ways to balance things. And a lot of the stuff that I have done, and a lot of the stuff I've been a part of, and plenty of things that I've seen from other people who are trying the same approach of commissioning, is that the pieces fail for a number of reasons. Oftentimes there's just problems with the part. They haven't studied things, all the same things that you mentioned earlier today of issues have absolutely totally come up. I mean, geez, I have some wonderful stories, but not for anything public. And And in fact, in the stuff that I come up with as well for my storytelling projects, I call them composed improvisations. And there are I have a few dozen of them that I tour around for kids, and not all of them work, not all of them are great, and the failures are more numerous than the successes. But for every one that you sort of succeed on, for every commission that hits, it's, I don't know, it's a pretty interesting. It's an interesting dynamic, to say the least, that we have. And I don't know if we have this more than other instruments. I really don't know. I haven't had in-depth conversations with like a cellist or a clarinetist to see what things are like for them currently. If there is like, these, like, does roll-off exist for cello? I don't know. I'm not really sure.
It does for choir, that's
pretty,
for sure.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Woo. That's something.
Well, I've had these conversations with them, and I think, not enough to, make some giant definitive statement, but in my experience, they have less patience for like stuff that doesn't work, stuff that doesn't lay well. Whereas I think we're very used to it. We're very like, oh yeah, we've been dealing with stuff that doesn't work since the beginning, and we're much more accepting of it. And as Mark Applebaum put it on my podcast, he said, percussionists are so cool because you guys are like willing to try anything. But other instrumentalists, I personally think percussionists need to say more often, like, dude, this doesn't work. Like, I can't do that. That can't be done. And that's how we're teaching composers. I think we do need to tell them that more often, and just, because I think vision is very easy to have. It's very easy to have vision. I can imagine this piece where, two cellists come flying in on trapeze, and then they fly off and land on trampolines and then do backflips while playing, and then two bass drums clash together over the audience, and yeah, great, oh, I'm a genius, go make it happen. Like, dude, no, there's nothing smart about coming up with that. That's very easy to come up with. It's but I think there are a lot of composers that, like, that's basically what they're doing, scaled down. It's like, I have this vision, and okay, go figure it out. And I think we need to stop accepting, like, oh yeah, I'll just make it work, because no, you need to like write something that's going to work. You need to write something that you've taken time and you've put effort into, to making sure it's playable. And if not, then just write a tape piece.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Please don't write a tape piece unless you really need to.
Or that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Too much. Yeah, I know. The gratuitous, like, big flops. Yeah, that's true. They do need to. But I guess this is the beauty of a well-spirited debate, is because I agree with exactly what you're saying, just on the opposite angle. Meaning, okay, I would much rather they come to me with mistakes, because some of those mistakes are going to land. And I would rather have that than just a bunch of stuff that automatically lands. And so I think we're essentially agreeing that it's the same thing.
But if it lands, like, it wasn't a mistake. Like, if it lands, it worked. You know what I mean? It's the stuff that doesn't land, and it reminds me of something you said.
The stuff that doesn't land can just be that much. Oh man! Some of the most beautiful pieces we have are things that didn't land correctly.
In the beginning, right? But they weren't poorly written. They weren't impossible.
Right.
Like it's
that
not
part,
like,
I don't disagree with at all.
It's not like the end of Rebond's B is starting to land. People just can't do that. It's like people come close, but it's not like I mean, it's not like that's a parallel to the Rite of Spring. Rite of Spring premiere was a nightmare. Blah blah blah. We know those stories. Like a lot of premieres are nightmares, and then people get better. They get used to it. The pitfalls of the parts get passed on and get forewarned and blah 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 blah, and we get used to it. But like I don't think everyone will be able to play the end of Reborn's B at tempo the way all orchestras can play Rite of Spring today, far better than the premiere. That's just not going to happen, you know.
But does it need to
I think
happen?
right, like some of the biggest pitfalls we've had have ended up being successes. But there was nothing wrong with Rite of Spring back then. They just sucked at it. They just weren't good at it. There is something impossible about the end of Reborn's B. We just can't do it. That's really the tempo of that. You know, so whatever. I mean, great. If we can do it someday, cool. But it's not like we're seeing incremental steps towards people being able to do it. It just literally might be outside. And something else about failures, that this isn't necessarily an opinion I hold, but I've heard this opinion before. You know, you said it's cool to experiment and it's good to experiment because it's okay to fail. Like, you know, you can have pieces presented and, you know, 4 out of 5 of them fail, but number 5 lands, and that's really awesome. I've heard people say, no, we can't afford to have failures right now. We can't afford to keep like, ooh, experimenting. We need to like classical music, contemporary music, jazz. It needs to just be good. Those are things that are dying. They're in peril. We can't be fiddling around with them anymore. We don't have the luxury of 4 out of 5 fail anymore. Again, not something I really share the opinion of, but I've heard people say. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I see this a lot because of most of the freelance work I do for new music stuff is basically through festivals, performing arts organizations, or kind of little concert series that are here, there, and so yeah, they're definitely concerned with the bottom line, and they're definitely concerned with scaring away a base and the donor base, and they're worried that another thing is going to pop up down the street with something that is already proven, such as a string quartet playing classics from the 17th and 18th century, and they're worried about that, and I definitely respect that, and that's a worry that we all share in the arts today, that you know, things aren't always the same in different time periods, but the arts have definitely gone through some changes over the years. So yeah, I definitely see that being a consideration, but that goes to the programming committee, the head of the concert series. That, you know, it doesn't go to the composer or the people who are proposing what pieces to be played, or if there's going to be a commission, or what kind of thing.
But I think it goes to the person commissioning it and saying how many experiments how much risk they're willing to take on something that won't work. So like if you're like you've said these whole gosh, almost 2 hours now, like you want to advocate for expansion and for new music and new pieces, are you advocating for it well when you accept experiments that don't always land? You know, should you go back and to the composer and say like, hey, hey, this doesn't work, and I don't think I can.
100% of the time, I can tell you that out of all the commissions I've done, which is, I can tell you because I just updated my CV, 164. Okay.
Wow,
And
that's cool, man.
I have responded to every single one, and I think that is the piece that cannot be missed. Meaning, we have to give feedback.
Yeah.
And we have to do that. Now, whether or not they take our advice, whether or not they change anything or heed anything, that's their personalities. That's life. But that's a secondary responsibility we have to absolutely 100% help, because there are just so many intangibles that they might not, that just sharing a little bit of information, or like just feedback essentially after a performance or the premiere or the recording goes a really long way.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah. I guess we're in agreement on that for sure. Man, it's been like almost 2 hours. And speaking of updating your CV, like, thanks so much for just wanting to talk. And yeah,
and great.
Yeah, and congratulations on all the just great stuff you're out there and doing. And it just sounds like everything's going great for you, Cory.
It's fun. I mean, I think we're all inside now, which is lovely.
I know.
I think we're all slowly going. So if everyone who's still listening, coronavirus is still going on, even at the end of our 2 hours together.
Yep.
But the world is still going, and yeah, one of the reasons I wanted to do this was partially because, well, I opened a can of worms on Cameron Leach's podcast, because
that was fun.
I'm just getting lit these days, because here's the deal, man. I don't have a boss except for my wife. She's in the other room. She's the boss. I don't have a boss, and I don't answer to people in the same way. And so I feel like, you know what? I'm getting older. I just turned 39. It's time to make some of my opinions known.
It's time to get lit up.
It's time to get lit up. And the really cool thing, though, is that when people have a platform such as yours or Cameron, or I've been on a few other ones, mainly for alternative careers in percussion, because I make the bulk of my careers is spent with the Storytelling Project. And to have the conversations, anyone who has a conversation means they actually are agreeing on an initial point. And that's the beauty of it. We've already agreed that we love what we do. We're just trying to just do more of it. Like we already agree on the most basic principle. And so that's why I appreciate, that's why I reached out on Facebook, and you're like, yeah, dude. You're like,
yeah.
I was last night. I'm like, Joe, I guess we are quarantined. We can pretty much do this whenever. But no, I appreciate it. And I hope that it generates discussion, because if we've learned anything from the world, discussion is always good. If you're talking about things and you're actually listening to the other person, then only good things come from that. And so whether that's in politics or society or percussion, which at the moment doesn't really seem like a really big deal in the world, like Western classical percussion, it's kind of a joke to me right now, but at the same time, it is important. It's our culture. For us, it's our community. And that's something that I think we can all rally behind. So I'm off my soapbox now, but I hope it generates discussion, and I'd love to hear what people think, because I don't know, why not, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Get lit up, man.
That's good. Well, hey, if you're ever lit up again, let's do it again.
Oh, there you go. That's so true. No, man, appreciate it. And yeah, have a safe rest of your however many weeks, months, years we are.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows, Cory? I mean, it's fun. It's kind of fun right now. I feel like I'm doing great with it, but the second I'm sick of it, it's just gonna be like, oh my God, I gotta go back to school. It's just like it's just gonna.
I need to escape.
It's gonna be all of a sudden. It's gonna be all of a sudden like I can't teach on Skype anymore. It's gonna be very Anyway, thanks a lot, Cory. This was fun.
No worries, man. All right, stay safe, and we'll talk soon.
Cool. Okay. Talk to you later.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.